I'm looking forward to this wonderful series of The Hero Within. As we begin, I want to first explain what archetypes are, since you'll keep hearing the word used a lot. And I want to also share, before we talk about the two, innocent and orphan, how this relates to your spiritual journey, our spiritual journey. So archetypes are patterns that have existed throughout all human time. So they're patterns that we continue to see through different cultures, different civilizations over the whole time of human history. And that's significant because one of the things that we say about our humanity is we come and we go. We're here for a second and we're gone. Civilizations come and go. But these patterns are lasting through civilizations, death. That they're consisting. So there's what that tells us, that these patterns are God's patterns, that they are transcending the normal dissipation that time gives to so much of the things that are born in the relative time and space. These patterns are staying consistent. So for those of you who are familiar with our Science of Mind chart, the archetypes are in the middle, which we call the law or the soul. And what happens is, because these are patterns that we can all find within ourselves, what we're doing is we're beginning to access, by accessing and understanding these patterns in ourselves, we are connecting with both ourselves humanly, the bottom of the chart, in the middle with our soulful part, and with spirit. It opens us up to spirit. So there's a Zen teacher called Genpo Roshi, and he started integrating it's a version of archetypes, but it's used in acting called voice dialogue. So when people do meditation, we always hear about the monkey mind. And there's different ways to be with the monkey mind. Try to push it out, stay focused on your mantra or your breath and push away all those thoughts. Or there's the witnessing. Don't try to push the thoughts away, just witness the thoughts coming through. What Genpo Roshi started to do with his Zen, he's a Zen lineage holder, actually, and what he started to do in teaching Zen was he learned it from a voice dialogue and integrated it into the practice, was to actually give voice to all these different voices that are in our head. So prior to an actual Zen practice, he would ask people to give voice to different voices, like the hurt child or the controller person, all these different identities within us. And what he found was that after people would give voice to these different beings that's inside of us, all these thoughts, that in fact they were getting to Satori more quickly. So rather than pushing them away or just witnessing them, it was integrating them. Ken Wilber talks about that spirituality has two purposes. One is to become completely free of all form, of all ideas, of all anything, and at the same time fulfilled. Include all form, include all life and relatively. So rather than separating ourselves, include it all. So as we look at these archetypal patterns, we recognize that they're all inside of us. And what I hope you discover, that as we start going through and these different archetypal patterns and you start playing with them during the week, that you're going to start to feel a greater fullness in your spiritual life. And I would love you to come to meditation before service on Sunday if you could. But even in your own meditation practice, notice if your meditation practice starts to go a little bit deeper as well. If you start to feel a different essence in the meditation practice and in your prayer work, as you're also accessing these different patterns within ourselves. We all have these patterns. And when we don't feel them, it doesn't mean that they're not there. It just means we don't know that they're there. They've been repressed, or we project them out there, someone else has them. And so there's even joy in re-accessing the energy of a particular archetypal pattern. And you might find with some of them, oh yeah, of course I know that one. You know, there might be some that have, you've definitely embodied and mastered. So Carol Pearson was saying in her book, Awakening the Hero Within, she says heroes. So I'm going to go back and forth using heroes and hero. I tend to like hero as an integrator of all the different heroes. It's like one big god and all the mini gods. You know? But I want to recognize, so what Genpo Roshi does with all these voices is then he ends with the big mind, big heart, that which includes it all, but is not limited to any of the voices, and is a master of them. So he differentiates between the controller, that part of us, our ego that's always trying to control things, and the master, which doesn't need to control. And the God self in us is the master. So we have one ultimate hero with all these mini heroes. So I would like to invite you to open up and see if you feel these energies of these heroic energies, and if they are something that you want to work on. Oh, and she was saying that with these 12, she works with primarily 12, that if we actually are able to access and cultivate all 12 of them, that we would be almost fully enlightened. So got something to look forward to. Total enlightenment by the end of September. Which is interesting, because that's why Genpo Roshi started using it. He found people were moving quicker into more higher states by going to these voices. So we have a wonderful opportunity here today. Not just today, but this next 2 months. So I hope you come every single Sunday and don't miss one. So we're going to start with the innocent and the orphan. So we're going to do all 12, and I'm going to do 2 every week, and they often tend to seem opposite to each other, and we want to cultivate both of them. It's like the yin and the yang. So we'll start with the child, our child self. I'm sure most of you heard of inner child work. Has anyone heard of inner child work? And so often when it was interesting, because I have a friend, and she was doing a lot of inner child work, and she was talking about it, and our idea of inner child was so different. And now as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, because what we mean by child is 2 separate things. Ultimately, we're both. They're both heroes. So she was more in tune with one, I was more in tune with the other, and we've since both working on integrating them. So the first inner child is the innocent child, and everyone is this at one point, even when you're a little tiny baby. Maybe you lose it quickly, but for some people it's sustained. And so the innocent is the innocent hero within us. The gifts of the innocent hero are trust, optimism, faith. It's all going to work out. I believe it. I see it. I trust that the universe is going to support me. She was saying, actually, I don't know what I thought about this, but she said she thought A Course in Miracles and some of the religious teachings really access the infant, so we would believe that these things actually would happen. But there is this idea of faith, that no matter what happens, the world is good and it's going to support me. And they walk through the world innocent, not necessarily always willing to take care of themselves, because they do believe that other people will take care of them, or the institutions. They have great faith in institutions, in their own parents. They just, like, the world's going to work out. So that innocence, that there's just a joy of living and believing in one's dreams. So the example I wanted to use today was Eddie the Eagle. And has anyone seen this movie yet? Can you just raise your hand? Gloria's the only one. Okay. So if you ever want to feel good, you got to watch Eddie the Eagle. It's a true story. And wasn't it just so fun? You just are so happy by the end of it. So unfortunately, spoiler alert, you're going to find out the story today. But it's actually already happened, so you could look it up and know. He was, Eddie grew up, and they didn't say in the movie, and I didn't read his biography or anything, but he had braces on his legs till about age 12, always on crutches. So at age 12, he was allowed to get them off, and he always wanted to be. One of his first books he read was about the Olympics and them doing these extraordinary feats. And he's like, I want my moment in the Olympics. Like, he was determined. So as soon as they put him off the crutches, they're like, take it easy. You're never going to be very physically. He just bolted out there, doing everything, falling all over the place. And so the definite sense you get watching the movie is that he wasn't very coordinated or particularly athletic, but did not stop him remotely, because he had faith. He was the innocent. I'm going to have this moment, and I believe. And so he just kept trying different things, and they show him growing up, trying, and he's always failing. And then he finally looks like, he gets the British, he's English, the downhill, no, just the regular downhill skiing. They only had 14 people, so he's thinking, well, there's not too many people on this, I might make it. But the guy comes over and says, look, you don't cut it. You'll never be on an Olympic team. So the innocent often has failures. It's not that they don't have failures, and they'll get sad over it. But, so I'll talk about Eddie, and then I'll talk about the rest of us later. Often that's what begins our growth, is when we have the failures and pain. But the innocent, regardless, because these archetypes spiral. They don't stay the same. We all grow and develop. We don't all stay children. So we start developing other archetypes. But the question is, do we keep that innocent hero within us that believes and has faith and trust, even in the midst of it? I'm not sure Eddie really develops the other archetypes. I think he really stays in that innocent. That's why it's such a good movie, because it's really solely about one archetype, which is the innocent. So he feels sad, and his parents have spent all this money, and his dad's so frustrated. They've had to mortgage their house, and he's like, he's terrible. Why do we keep paying for him? He doesn't earn any of his own money. And the son goes, okay, I'm going to work. Oh, but then I have another idea. And off he goes, and his mom supports him financially. So the last one he has is he sees a ski jump, and where you go, it's called the ski jump, where they go flying down there and they ski, and there's no one on the British Olympic team. They have no ski jumpers. They haven't had a ski jumping team since 1920s. So he goes off to Germany, where they say the best of the best are, of course, and he just takes himself on the little one, and so you see him go through the different phases. I won't go through the whole thing. So and he gets a coach. So everything happens the way we say it happens. He gets the support he needs. There's a old, worn-down guy who's a brilliant ski jumper, takes him on, starts teaching him just the basics, how to survive without killing himself. And so the British Olympics don't want him to go, but he finally gets their goal, so they have to send him. He's made fun of. The other British Olympians are made fun of him. So on the one hand, he's happy he's made the Olympics. On the other hand, he's totally ridiculed. And then he makes his first jump, and he's so amazed that he stood up and landed that he gets all excited. And everyone thinks he's hysterical, so he becomes this big joke. But the reporters are so fascinated by him, so he starts getting his attention. I want my Olympic moment. And then finally, at the end, he makes the big 90-foot jump, and everyone's so happy for him, and he becomes this big name in the Olympics. And so there you see someone who is innocent, who didn't believe what every single person told him, that he had no talent and he was never going to make it. He did not care. He held to his faith, to his optimism, and he stuck with it. And he had a coach that supported him, and then suddenly the whole country was behind him. He was the worst. He was the worst. There's this one beautiful moment when he's with the best ski jumper. They're going up together. And this is the first time Eddie's ever gone down the 90-foot. The first time he ever did the 70-foot, he ended up in the hospital for quite some time. So everyone was a little nervous about this 90-foot one. And he's going up with the guy who's number one. I forgot. I think he was Swedish. And he said, and he was so much better than everyone. And he said, Eddie, we're 1-1. He said, we're so far apart of everyone else's scores. You're so below, and I'm so above, that neither one of us are doing it for the competition. We're doing it for the pure joy of jumping and ski jumping. And Eddie was like, yeah, I'm with the best guy here. It was just, and that gave him, and that's when he landed. And it's just this uplifting movie of faith, of belief, and everything supports you. And he got exactly what he wanted, which he held since he was a child. What she says is the innocent will have these dreams. So we sang Dream On. You'll have these dreams as a child, and there's that innocent part of us. I'm not going to let that go. I believe, even though everyone else tells me I can't do it, even though he goes years and years of failure, I believe. And it's completely irrational. There is nothing rational about his belief. And yet, because of his belief, he attracts exactly what he needs to make it happen. That's the innocent hero. And that innocent hero is in all of us. So my invitation this week is to get in touch with that part of you that's still innocent, that feels into like, I remember some dreams that I had, or I can believe, I can trust. Even though everything has told me that I can't trust, there's still a part of me, that pure part of me, that knows there's something in this world that I can trust, that if I hold on with faith, with trust, that something beautiful and magnificent is going to happen in my dream. So my invitation this week for the innocent is to feel that, feel the positivity, feel the joy, feel your faith, and that it's still there inside of you, and it's a heroic energy. It's heroic energy. When we think of hero, I wanted to say this too, when we think of hero, we tend to think of warrior. That's hero, warrior. We immediately think of Superman or Batman or all these big superhero movies that we have. What I love about this deepening of hero is it's all these different aspects are all heroic when we live them to the highest. So now we'll take it a little bit past Eddie. So what Carol Pearson talks about is that most of us don't just stick to one archetype. We do start, we fall down and we have to develop the other archetypes. So we spiral and we grow. But we want to hold on to that innocence even as we go through the other archetypes. And she said, ultimately, it's the beginning of our journey and it's the end of our journey. And she calls it the wise innocent. And that's the innocent being in us that knows that there's deception and there's violence and there's cruelty and things don't work out, and yet we still can hold on to that innocence. And so that's ultimately where we're moving towards in this particular archetype, is not to stay naive, not to pretend bad things don't happen. We can integrate that, but still, even in the midst of that, hold on to that innocent self. Isn't this fun? So, we're all so beautiful. So the other aspect of our childhood, the other hero, is the orphan. This is the child part of us that has been wounded, that has felt abandoned, that feels betrayed in some way. Even in families that seem like they're intact, we can still have that feeling of being abandoned or betrayed. And there's those deep wounds. We all have that as well. I don't think any one of us, I love what Treya Wilbur said, that I'm one with everyone in my perfection, but I'm also one with everyone in our suffering. I've never met a human being who hasn't gone through some sort of suffering. So it's acknowledging that we're wounded, and probably our parents had some sort of wounding themselves, so we got some of that carried on in our own life. Listening to them. When we connect and to the orphan as hero. So the hero with the wounding, if we don't go into the heroic part of it, what happens is the pain can be so paralyzing. We get so isolated. We feel so betrayed, not just by our parents, it can be country. So she was also talking about collective group, where you feel betrayed by institutions, by governments, by the educational system, by the justice system, that there's different types of betrayal where we lose any sense of confidence in any authority figure, whether it's parental, familial, or organizational. And that pain can be so paralyzing that we don't move. We just get so upset, and there's nothing to trust, and we isolate is what we do. The way the orphan gets healed is to face, the hero orphan is to start to face the wounds, where we start to face the pain that we've been through and acknowledge it. And generally what orphans do, because there is an anti-authoritarian sentiment, because it's that place has betrayed us, the orphans find other orphans. We find other wounded people to do our healing and to connect and to say, I feel with you. So the gift of the orphan is empathy. So, well, I'll get there in a minute. So we start to learn compassion for others. So whether it's you're becoming part of a social justice movement and you feel connection with other people who've been hurt by a government, or a common one is 12-step groups, where you start to feel the connection. 12-step groups don't have authority. They don't have an institution that they have to speak to. It's everyone speaking to each other, person to person, and say, I feel your pain, I know your pain, and how healing that is. And that's how we learn to create this incredible interconnection with one another, this deep resonance. So if we don't honor the orphan within us, if we don't deal with the feelings and the emotions, we can go on to other archetypes but be cut off, and they'll be a little bit more distorted. I'll talk about that in a minute with the movie When a Man Loves a Woman. Anyone seen When a Man Loves a Woman? Oh, yay! Have you seen When a Man Loves a Woman? It came out like in 94, I think. I looked up. Meg Ryan and Andy Garcia. You should see it, definitely. Not to point anyone out. What? He's a pilot, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it was a long time ago. And so I was like, that was the first one that came to me. So I watched it yesterday. It was so good. And I think sometimes movies are good depending what mood you're in. And I just clearly was in the mood for it because I'm crying. It was really good. I loved it. So give a general gist. She's an alcoholic. They clearly love each other. Her husband's a pilot. She has 2 children. Her oldest daughter by another husband, and her youngest with her pilot husband. He's used to taking care of her. It's the typical often you hear he's used to taking care of her when she drinks too much. Finally, she has her goes out on bottoms out, and goes to a rehabilitation center. In this rehabilitation center, she has to start dealing with her wounds. See, her pain, that was how she was isolating from her wounds. She wasn't dealing with them, she wasn't facing them, she was using alcohol. And so by going to this rehabilitation, and you can see how she's changing. Like at first she didn't want to be there, but the walls start to come down, and she's talking with other people. She's doing exactly what we're talking about, learning to be empathetic and feeling other people's pain, and they're understanding her here, and she's discovering this whole other world by opening up to her wounds, and she starts to change. Then she's talking to her husband. He hasn't changed yet. He's still operating at the old way of how they used to interact. And so here's what's interesting. So he's in essence a warrior. He was taking care of her. When she was, as an alcoholic, she needed a lot of taking care of, and he was the warrior to take care of her. But he was a warrior who had not dealt with his own wounded orphan. So when she started dealing with her wounded orphan, what once was very helpful, the warrior that was very helpful, then felt abusive, because now he was trying to take care of her, but he wasn't listening to her. He wasn't able to have any empathy for her because he hadn't dealt with his own wounds. So over time in the movie, he eventually goes to Al-Anon and starts to deal with his own wounds, and he begins to shift as well. And then you look at the child. You know, the child's going to identify strongly with the orphan, feeling betrayed and abandoned by her mother, who had this breakdown and had to leave. She will have to go through it. But having two parents that have now dealt with their orphan wounds, they're going to be able to help her through that archetype and master it and come to a level of mastery that they didn't have help with. So why they were struggling so much as adults is because there was all this woundedness that was never dealt with. But they're going to be able to help their child. Their child also will have it, but they'll be able to help her, so she'll be able to go through it in a much more healthy and masterful way. So the wounded orphan in us is that part of us that hurts. And the question is how much am I willing? So one of the things he said when he first went to Al-Anon, he didn't like it, and he kept calling them losers. Well, they're just a bunch of losers. They go sit around and whine all the time about their problems. He said, they're not strong enough to handle it. I'm strong enough to handle it. And it took him along to realize there's just some things he couldn't handle, and that he had to soften into his heart to say, there's some things I just don't know how to do. When we don't deal with our orphan, we can hurt others without even knowing that we're hurting others, because we can't even have empathy because we can't even see it. So I'm inviting you to look at also your orphan. Isn't it wonderful, the yin and the yang? So you have this innocent, pure, everything's going to work out. The orphan often feels somewhat cynical. No one's going to do this for me. I got to do the work. There's no savior. There's no someone going to come rescue me. There's much more realistic side to the orphan. I got to do the work. I got to stand up. I got to be responsible. This is how we begin to grow and develop. She said an innocent who doesn't really own their orphan side doesn't really start to become responsible, become a mature grown-up. And you see that in Eddie the Eagle. You never feel like he ever actually becomes a grown-up. He's just this beautiful child, and it's wonderful. But we want to integrate all aspects of ourselves. So we can hurt other people by not dealing with our own woundedness. So what I'm inviting to you is just being with what part of you is an orphan, feels wounded, feels sad, and what part of you just feels really uncomfortable with just being with that. And the way you know if you're uncomfortable is if you notice, and I don't think there's too many of you because you're all so loving and warm, but just it's good to just notice. If there's times throughout this next week where you start to feel superior to somebody, where you feel like they're just like, they don't have it together as I do. They're just like a little like, sort of when we start going into that superior mode, we have forgotten about, oh no, we were an orphan too. We were lost too. We didn't know what we were doing as well. So it's a reminder to soften our heart, to be open and more generous with other people and their weaknesses, because we also know that we have our weaknesses. And that's when we really can be a healing presence and beneficial presence to other people as well as to ourselves. So those are our first two archetypes, innocent and orphan. And notice if there's one that you vibrate more with than another. So when my friend was doing inner child work, she resonated more with the orphan. I resonated more with the innocent. So I did feel superior. That's what I'm saying. You have to be honest. And then, but then I remember, well, wait a minute, when I went to therapy, and it took them a while because I was so attached to the innocent archetype to say, oh no, I had wounding. I was hurt. And it hurt, and it felt bad, and I felt lonely, and I felt left out. And that was a big part of my identity as well as innocent. I had just chosen to ignore that part of me. So I had to reintegrate it. Because if I'm not reintegrating it, when my friend tells me about her work, I'm separating myself from her. That's your work. So I had to grow and say, nope, that's my work too. And then for her, it was her work too. And we talked about, for her, it was really hard to get in touch with the innocent side that she had. She did grow up with an alcoholic and felt very unsafe. So the idea of trusting the world and feeling safe and optimistic that things will work, that was really hard work for her to get in touch with. So but it was there. It's as strongly there as, we have them both really strongly inside of us. We lean to one to the other, but that doesn't mean the other one isn't there. So that's the invitation and the play this week, is to really be with both of these archetypes and see which one you lean towards. If you have any resistance to either one of them, you think one of them just dopey and flaky, you might think the innocence just a little bit, I don't know. She was saying, the reason why I like she was saying, the reason why she was pointing with the Course in Miracles is that we need the innocent. That's where miracles happen. When we have that innocent faith is where miracles happen. So they're both so important. And next week we're going to go into warrior and caregiver. The warrior, there's so many, obviously, superhero movies, action movies that we could do warrior. Even something like a feminine superhero for me is Joan of Arc. I don't know if you guys know do y'all know the story of Joan of Arc? Man, I remember my father gave me the Bernard Shaw play of Joan of Arc. Amazing. But I wanted to go a different route. Well, no, you can look at any of those movies. There's also social justice warriors like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Harvey Milk. And totally by accident, Jack and I watched a movie on Friday night called The Insider. And this was a 60 Minutes report about the whistleblower for the tobacco company. So what I feel like our culture has been through is in the 80s and 90s, we were in a very innocent state. So these cycle, they come and go. And so I think in the 80s and 90s, we're in a very innocent stage. We returned to an innocent stage after cynical times. Innocent, we live in a great country, we live in a great world, everything's working, we got lots of money, both under Reagan and Clinton, just positivity. And then 2000 with the Iraq war, with the financial bust, with all the pain that starts to show up, we're cycling around now, we're in the orphan stage again, and we're feeling a lot of cynicism about authority. And so I think in that place, watching a movie like The Insider, seeing the heroic, what that heroic energy looks like for someone to try to take down the tobacco company, which is a big institution, powerful institution that would do anything to get to shut them up, I think is a wonderful example of a warrior that's not the typical action hero warrior. So, but you can watch any movie that you think, and then Caregiver, the first movie that came to my mind is Marvin's Room. Did anyone see that one? With also a 90s movie with Diane Keaton and Meryl Streep. So I have to catch up on that one. But I remember thinking, wow, caregiving is really hard. So we're complete. Anyone have any thoughts or questions before we pray? You like it? Do you like are you feeling your heroic innocent and your heroic orphan? All right, let's pray. You're all staring at me, so I had to check in there. How y'all doing? And how grateful I am for all of these different voices that we have within us, that they are all so rich and have so many gifts to give us. And I give thanks here and now for the power and the presence and the love of God that is in, through, and as all of these beautiful gifts, these patterns within us, and is beyond all of them, transcends all of them, transcends all form, phenomenal existence, transcends all time and space, transcends all dimensions, transcends even energy. It is beyond the beyond. It is beyond any concept or form. There is the great emptiness. And how grateful I am to know that emptiness is even now coming alive and speaking itself to us in the ways that are perfect and unique for each and every one of us. It is giving itself voice in a way that is essential, that matters, uniquely and powerfully as everyone in this room. Our heroes within, even though there is one beautiful pattern, show up differently. And I am grateful for all the different stories, all the different beautiful expressions of art that we all are. Beautiful masterpieces of the light and the shadow, being created and formed breath by breath, moment by moment, in all of our relationships with each other, with the world, with our bodies, with our minds, with our finances, with all form. We are alive in the beauty and the magnificence of spirit as all form. And as we feel into this oneness and this purity of being, of every unique person is essential to this world, I give a special prayer for my teacher, my mentor, my colleague, my friend, Reverend Nirvana Gale, who was completely unique and mattered in this form, on this earth plane. The way he showed up was like nobody else. The love that radiated through every atom and cell of his being was real, was palpable, even though it was unseen. And what I know and claim and accept is that he is on the other side of the veil, even now, dancing in delight in this love that he has always been, that has just changed form and has just changed its beautiful creative expression, but there is the beautiful delight, reunited with all of his spiritual and biological teachers and friends and community on the other side of the veil. I am so grateful that each of us that have been touched by his life, even this community who has been touched by him, even though he doesn't even know how deeply we have felt him at times, the love, the stories that I have shared of what unconditional love looks like, feels like, tastes like, is like. We are all blessed, and we are a better earth, and we are a better people because of this one life. And even as I feel and honor this with him and bless his family as they say goodbye, I honor all of us, knowing that all of our lives matter, that every individual singular life matters and makes a difference to how this whole planet operates. So I just give thanks and honor every individual in this room who can hear my voice. God is great, as all of us. Thank you, God. I release this word now. I let it be. And so it is.
And so